I'm Pastor Donna Farrell, coming to you with a word in due season. This word in due season will give you hope for better things to come and inspire and challenge you with the help of God to change your life, taking you to a higher level in God. Today, I want to share a word with you, and it's entitled, Don't Look Back. And I'm sharing about the story of Lot's wife. For many of you, you would have known the story, and many of you would have known the end of Lot's wife, being that she turned into a pillar of salt. But let's just look at some of the reasons on her journey in Sodom and Gomorrah and what took place before she turned to a pillar of salt. Now, in the book of Genesis, chapter 13, and reading from verses 5 through to 7, it talks about the reasons why we think, or why I think, that Lot's wife looked back. In actual fact, the Bible doesn't actually say specifically why she looked back. The Bible doesn't say anything about Lot's wife, just that she held back a bit when she had to leave the city and so forth. But I believe that Lot's wife had a profound love for the world. I believe that Lot's wife had status where she was in Sodom. I believe, obviously, that Lot was a wealthy man. We know this when we look in further up in the Bible in Genesis, because he had enough livestock and enough servants to make a bit of a problem between him and his uncle Abraham. So he was a wealthy man. I believe that because they lived in Sodom, that Lot was well known. We read that also in the book of Genesis. It tells us that Lot sat at the gate of the city. And people who sat at the gate of the city were usually elders or judges, usually well-respected men in the Bible in those days. So Lot sat at the city gate, well known. I believe Lot's wife was also well known because of her husband's status. She probably had a huge house, fine furniture, expensive clothes, loads of servants. Nothing wrong with that. But the question is, why did she look back? Lot had achieved a great amount of wealth. He was a wealthy man anyway, but he had achieved a great amount of wealth even whilst he was in Sodom. Lot's wife may have been thinking that if she had to leave Sodom, that she would have to leave her houses, her land, her friends, her status, her expensive clothes. The title of this word today is Don't Look Back. God might be calling you to a specific work. God might be telling you to come out of a certain place. God might be telling you to leave a certain person, an individual, a company of people, I should say, as opposed to a person. God might be telling you to break relationship with an individual, break a business relationship with an individual or company. The title of this word today is Don't Look Back. You see, when God gives a command, you and I as children of God, our first instinct should be to trust God and believe God. But our human instincts usually kicks in and we think about, oh, what if this happens? If I do this, what's going to happen here? What's the consequences if I should obey? What's the consequences if I don't obey? All these questions go through our mind. But as a child of God, when God gives an instruction, our first point should be, yes, Lord, and obey, because we do not want to pay the consequences of disobeying God. You know, the book of 1 John 2 and chapter 2 and verses 15 through to 17 reads, Love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. If any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, and the lust of the eyes, the pride of life, is not of the Father, but of the world. And the world passeth away, and the lust thereof. but he that doeth the will of God abideth forever. So let's backtrack a little bit. We know the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, and this word is not necessarily about Sodom and Gomorrah, it's specifically about Lot's wife. But the story is, there is danger in the city. The city is so perverse, so much hatred, so much sexual immorality, so much pride, so much lust. The word goes on to say that, Sodom and Gomorrah and the other 3 cities, there were 5 in total, that they were full of lust and pride. They did not look after the poor and so forth, including the sexual immorality. That's what was happening in the city. And here we have a righteous man in the name of Lot, being an elder, being respected, sitting at the city gate, a righteous man living in such a city. God sends 2 angels down to take out Lot and his family. And when the angels turn up, we know the story of the men in the city wanting to have sex with these 2 angels to the point where they wanted to break down the door. The angels then blind these men so that they could not get in the house. And then one of the angels says to Lot, besides your sons and your daughters and your son-in-laws, whoever else you have in the city, tell them to get out the city. In that same chapter of chapter 19 and verse 14, the angel asks him, besides your daughters and so on, who else have you got in the city? Go find them, go tell them to come out. Lot goes and tells them. He speaks. The word of God says he speaks to his son-in-laws. And they thought he was joking. I wonder, many a times, Lot being a righteous man, a man of God, a man that knew the word of God, an elder who sat at the city gate, speaking now to his son-in-laws. Why would his son-in-laws think he was joking? Did they not take Lot seriously? Was Lot having, if you like, 1 foot in the church, 1 foot out of the church? I don't know. But whatever the reason, his son-in-laws thought he was joking and did not go with him. Now many people think, when we read the word, many people think that Lot and his wife only had 2 daughters. No, they didn't. When you read that chapter, it talks about Lot's 2 daughters in the house, who Lot said to these men, you can have these 2 daughters that never known men. But yet in the same verse, it talks about these daughters and his son-in-laws. Well, when we look at history, history tells us that when a maiden was betrothed to a man, he was considered to be her husband, although the marriage hadn't taken place. I believe this was the case with Lot's 2 daughters. Yet Lot had other children because he went to his son-in-laws. And if he went to his son-in-laws, that meant that Lot had other daughters who were married to his son-in-laws. These son-in-laws took no notice of Lot, didn't believe Lot, and so decided to stay. The fact is, the angels had to literally grab a hold of Lot and his wife and the 2 daughters in the house and literally lead them out of the city. And even going out of the city, when they're telling them to go far beyond these cities, Lot is still arguing with the angel. I believe Lot did not think that God was going to destroy the city or those cities, but God was about to do so. In any event, they left. And the angel gave them a warning. It says, do not, 2 warnings, to go beyond the plain and not to look back. Well, Lot's wife did. But it's not the case that she just looked back just for so. I don't believe so. Lot's wife had children. She had family. She had blood relatives left behind. She had her status, as I said. She probably had that huge house, as I've said before. She probably had, well-known friends and so forth. Her status was important to her. Her love for the world was more important, it would appear, than the command of God. God gave the word, do not look back. And yet in her heart, she was probably grieving for her children, her daughters, her daughter-in-laws and other family members, and grieving for the life, the status that she had. You know, there is coming a day in this generation that God is going to speak to his children and say, get up, get out of the city, get up, get out of your town, get up, get out of that relationship, get up and do what I say to do. And God is going to, there's coming a day when God is going to say, don't look back. Or we might not become a pillar of salt. But look what happened to Lot's wife. She was consumed. The angel said, if you do not come out of the city, you will be destroyed and consumed with the city. And Lot's wife was consumed because she looked back. And many people I've heard as I was growing up say that Lot's wife looked back in her heart. But the word does not tell us that. It clearly says that Lot's wife looked back. She turned back, looking at the city and longing in her heart for a life that she had. Longing in her heart possibly that her children would come with her. Do you realize that when Jesus gave the command for his disciples, they had a choice? They could either follow him or they could stay with their family. And that was probably one of the hardest things that those disciples had to do. For some of them were married and some of them had children. But they left them and they followed the Son of God. In this day and age, what are we prepared to lose? What are we prepared to leave behind? If we're not prepared to leave certain things behind, we can be consumed like Lot's wife. We will be destroyed like Lot's wife. Not necessarily a pillar of salt, but we could die physically, spiritually, become ill. We will not be in the place where God would have us to be because we would be disobedient to the voice of God. I don't know what status you have in your community, in your country, in your town. But this one thing I do know. Where there is impending danger and God's children are at a place, God will always send warning. I plead with you today to heed the voice of God. When God says to get up, get thee out of a place, do so. Don't linger back, not even for your child. Don't linger back, not even for your wife or your husband. Don't linger back, regardless as to what you have attained in that place. Because if God is telling you to leave, he's telling you to leave for a good reason. And when God tells you to leave a place that is so full of sin, a place that was only going to bring you destruction, he's telling you to leave because he has a better place for you to go to. Lot's wife loved the world so much that she disregarded the voice of the servant of God. She disregarded the voice of the angel. She disregarded it and longed for what she was leaving behind. There is coming a day, very soon, where God is going to speak to his people and give them commands. Are we going to be obedient? Are you going to be obedient? Don't sit and argue like Lot did with the angel. Don't sit and ponder in your heart like Lot's wife did. But obey the voice of God and allow God to lead you to a new place. Allow God to take you to a higher ground. I do not know what you're going through. I do not know what you're about to go through. But this one thing I do know. There is impending danger coming. And God is speaking. And God will protect his children. If God himself has to hold you by the hand and lead you out, he will do so. He did so for Lot. God is speaking. Open up your spirit and open up your ears to hear what the Spirit of God is saying. And don't look back. God bless you.